Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Dodd Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
What's up, OG5? It's been a silly night. We usually don't get right into it, but as you may have heard, the theme song was a little quieter than normal. Henry and I just did like an 18-minute OG5 podcast for the Patreon users, and we went to start the show. We're all amped up, tuned up, ready to rock, and our theme song soundboard crashed on me, so I had to quickly find our theme song in our deep archives of all the crap on my computer and launch it in Winamp. Yes, I said Winamp from 1999. They do remake it, and I am using it. But anyhow, welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for hanging out for another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II podcast. Jeff is not with us tonight, but joining us once again from Alabama. He's in the dark. He's in the shade. His light bulb burnt out. And he is joining us from the dark side, one Mr. Henry Sledge. Henry, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing well. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Before we get into the World War II stuff, Henry and I, we kind of, sometimes we'll use these episodes where it's just the two of us as a house cleaning episode, or maybe we'll get off topic a little bit and just get caught up. We'll just wing it a little bit. We really have not that we always have show prep, but we have even less show prep than we normally do on shows like tonight. But last week, or the week before, you briefly brought up the fact you had to have hand surgery. And then as we were getting into it tonight, you were wanting to go down that alley before we went on the show because, as I was saying on the History Behind the Page podcast with Sarah the History Chick the other night, one of the things about Henry, Jeff, and I is we get along fantastic, but we don't feel that like we have to hound each other. So we'll do a show and we won't maybe talk to each other for 3 or 4 days. And then maybe the day before, the morning of, we'll get caught up in stuff. And so, I haven't really talked to you since last week. How is the hand going?
Well, so what happened, Don, was I had to have, it was an operation on my thumb tendon. They call it a trigger release, because my thumb was just like something about or pulley release is the name of trigger thumb is the problem, and then pulley release is the procedure. And then on my elbow, my right elbow, they had to do an epicondyle debridement.
Easy for you to say.
And that was, and so, recovering from that, the damn elbow, the problem is, it's got a little bit of some fluid on the top of it, a hematoma. So ooh. I've got to go see them tomorrow, and they're going to determine if they need to do anything about that. Hopefully not, but Wednesday will be 3 weeks since the surgery, and this fluid is still kind of gathered over the top of it. I'm just going stir crazy, man, because I can't work out. It's cut into all my activities. I mean, it just sucks. When you work out and you're regularly exercising, as you know, when something pulls you out of that groove, it just sucks. It depresses you. It frustrates you.
Not only
whatever gains you made, you see them erode.
And not only that, but when the time comes, the thing about working out, whether it's running, riding a bicycle, anything that gets you into zone 2 or zone 3,
yeah,
you have to do it consistently, and it's 87% of it's mental, and I think it'd be fair to say that 60% of it is habitual or pattern based, meaning you have to do it, you have to form a schedule, and once you get out of that schedule, and once you get used to not doing it, and then you go back to do it, it's even more of a kick in the gut, because let's say you're riding 10, 15, 20 miles, or let's say you're doing an hour at the gym, with your arm or whatever, swinging a hammer, gardening, pottery, whatever sort of thing one may do with their hand. And then you have that situation, and then you go back, and not only is your hand sore, but just the overall, you're like, wow, this sucks. Now I gotta work twice as hard to get back to where I was, that I wasn't even totally happy with then. You're struggling to get to this point. You feel like you're plateaued. You're like, man, I haven't made any gains in a while, or I haven't lost weight in a while. I haven't trimmed any time off, whatever your goal may be, and you've plateaued. But now you would just wish, I'd give anything to get back to that plateau that I was at. I was so disappointed.
The plateau would be great, but I don't know. I mean, I think July 14th will be like the 5-week mark, which was the surgeon implied that, that would kind of be when he would clear me to get back to like working out with weights and stuff. But I don't know with this hematoma, the fluid, which is not uncommon. I mean, nobody's like, oh my God, that's really bad. No, it's not like that at all.
Well, that's a good thing, because I was going to ask you, what is the worst case scenario with not doing anything about said fluid?
Well, his assistant called me this morning to check on me. And I said, well, it's not getting any better. It's not getting any worse. And so they're going to see me tomorrow. But, she said, look, he may let him put eyes on it. He may want to do a debride it, which is go back in, which I hope they don't have to do.
Can't they just put like a turkey baster in there and suck it out?
Well, and that's an option too. Or he may not do anything, but whatever. I just want to get cleared so I can get back to living doing what I normally do.
Well, in our little pre-show, you were getting ready to go down that road when I told you to hold off, because I can relate by proxy. The reason I ask about the fluid is last Monday, following our episode, the podcast, I went. It's a little behind the scene action. We start here at 9:30 at night because there's three of us, 3 different time zones, and by us starting at 9, it's 6 o'clock Jeff's time, so it allows him to get home from work, and it's 8 o'clock Henry's time, and that was kind of always the marker because I have 3 parrots, and my parrots don't go to bed until 7 o'clock, and if we try to do this in the daytime, you'll just hear parrots in the background. Sure, for this podcast, we can pretend we're in Saipan. Maybe it'd be good ambiance, but for the other podcast, it's out of place. But anyhow, so we do the show. It usually runs 120 minutes or so. Jeff and Henry bounce, and then I upload it to the website, which then deploys to all the podcast apps. And then I got to write a description, and I could take an extra 20 minutes to update the website, but I don't. I go do the things that I got to do to go to bed so I get up in the morning, and then I update the website at work. And that's why, for those of you who do both, that's why the podcast is available Monday night, but not available on the website via the link and the information till Tuesday, sometimes Wednesday, depending on how busy I am. It's also kind of my little thanks to you guys who download it from the app. You get a little ahead of everybody else. So last Monday, you and I get off, and I go take a shower, and I'm actually in the water closet doing my pre-shower ritual that people do because we're human beings, and I hear this sound, and it's Carrie. She's crying and struggling. And I opened the door. Apparently, she had to use the restroom as well and went to our daughter's bathroom, who had just gotten out of the shower. Now I'm in Florida, and tile floors are all the rage.
Oh, yeah.
And when you have a daughter who is 60% Hispanic, Mexican heritage, and 40% Native American, she has that super long, thick black hair that doesn't dry without actual effort too well with a towel, unless you actually try to dry with a towel. And apparently her practice is to stand on the floor and comb the water out, unbeknownst to us. I'm sure you see where this is going. So Carrie proceeds to use her bathroom. She shuts the door, locks it, turns around, steps on the wet tile floor, and in her words, like an ice rink, she twists her right ankle, falls down straight on the tile floor on her kneecap, and she weighs almost nothing. Her knee has no protective layer, if you will, and she went down hard. Now, luckily, our daughter knows how to pick bedroom doors, which, let's be honest, in the house is not hard. You just need something to twist the little thing inside. You can do it with a bobby pin. Luckily, she was able and had that skill, because once again, I was in the bathroom, I had no knowledge this was going on, and she was able to break into the bathroom, thus rescue Carrie, and that's when Carrie made her way into our bathroom, and I learned what had happened. I had to pick her up and carry her to bed. Her knee hurt. It was a little swollen. Next morning, we wake up, and it looks like she has a small potato under her kneecap, and her ankle is completely blue.
Oh, boy.
Now, luckily, with my new job, I got a boss who is all about family, and his rule is take care of your family, then come to work. So I told her, hey, let me know. I can take urgent care. There's one not even a half a mile from our house. She said, well, I'll see how I feel. So I went to work, told the boss, hey, I may need to take the extended dance remix of my lunch. Told him what happened. He said, why wait? Go now. I said, well, let me call her and convince her. So anyhow, I left work, took her to urgent care. She had an x-ray. Nothing's broken, but she has a build up a fluid, hence me asking you what the worst case scenario. And they told her to go get an MRI at a orthopedic.
Yeah.
That was 7 days ago. Here we are 7 days later, and she still hasn't scheduled the MRI because last summer she hurt her arm kayaking because we kayak fish prior to this accident every darn day. And I don't know through paddling or what, she could not do this. She could not raise her hand above her head. It could only go to here. So she went to a orthopedist and had an MRI for her shoulder. Nothing was wrong. Here's some pain medicines and a $300 copay. So she's a little hesitant, but I told her, so fast forward. No, there ain't no fast forward. She got crutches and the same cast your daughter would wear if she hyperextended her knee while playing volleyball. And we've all seen the high school girl with that leg cast on, that soft one.
Yeah.
And so she's basically been laid up in bed. And much like you were saying, she's I can't do nothing. She can't fish. Luckily, she's a school teacher, so she was already out for the summer for school, so she's not missing any work. But she's essentially bedridden because not only is it her knee, but it's her ankle. And so the crutches are a pain in the ass. And so I've been wheeling her from the bed to the bathroom via an office chair, which is doing wonders on my carpet, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other day Sunday, I came home from taking the kid to the beach because we went to go to the beach on Father's Day prior to the accident. But as we were talking on last episode, it rained. So we just went home. And so the kid's been stuck in the room all week. Carrie's been laid up. She can't do anything. Basically, I agreed, hey, take the kid to the beach. So we went to the beach. I came home. I passed out on the bed, and I hear kerthunk blood, ow. She had to use the restroom, and instead of waking me up to push her across the room in the office chair, she thought she'd do me the favor, and she used the crutches and went to shut the bedroom door so she can get by and fell again, luckily this time on the carpet.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, 4 days... That happened on Monday. By Thursday, her foot still looked like it was just attacked by a swarm of bees. So her foot's, and it's blue, but they said nothing's broken, but she must have a really bad fracture or sprain. So hopefully maybe tomorrow she will call and schedule an MRI for me to take her to. But I can definitely understand how you feel about not being able to use an appendage. She can't use hers. Luckily for you, it doesn't require someone to push you around the house. But
no.
I definitely feel your overwhelming desire to get out and do things because by proxy, I can't do things either because I got to be here to, cook and help around the house. And so I'm not fit. And it's raining every night. We had thunderstorms up until 20 minutes ago. So not only by the time I get home, I got to cook dinner and all that stuff, but it's also raining. And so I've been basically hanging around the house too. So I definitely feel your pain on that. While we're off topic, thank you guys for your continued support. It's been a while since we got any email, so please email us at mailcall@WTSPWWII-EP122-Saipan. I understand we don't give that email out every episode, which we need to. We need to get that out there so you guys have it memorized. So you can, whenever you have a question, you're driving down the street, say, I wonder what Henry would think. You can just pull out your cell phone and shoot us an email. Or, I wonder what Jeff... Speaking of wheelchairs, Jeff sent me a... did you get that text?
Yeah,
message?
I saw that.
Jeff picked up like a 1941 wheelchair. I'm like, oh, I need that. Carrie blew out her knee. But so Jeff's got the wheelchair.
Of Christmas in Connecticut because there's a scene where the two stars, they were on a destroyer. They got sunk by a U-boat and then picked up, and so they're in the hospital for a while because they were at sea for like 18 days.
That's
on a raft.
That's a big item. Now Jeff's like most of us. Most of our gear is relegated to a room. At what point is that stuff going to start wafting into the living room and his old lady's going to have to put her foot down?
Oh, yeah.
The wheelchair, that's a bit much. Like I have a reproduction 1950s Coca-Cola cooler, which is in my living room my dining room area right now. It's usually out in the garage. And she kind of looks at it like, get that thing out of here. But I will say that thing was a lifesaver when we had our last hurricane. I had no power because it's an ice chest. You just put your beer, drinks, and set in there, fill it full of ice, and it stays nice and cold. As I said, Wednesday night, I was on the History Behind the Page podcast with Sarah. You can follow her on Instagram at the History Chick 1941, and that is Chick with a K. Some people spell it CHIC. No, you got to put a K at the end of that bad boy, including the 1941, and you can also find her on YouTube. And as I said on her show the other night, thanks to Henry, we do have a new feature on our website, which is the little tab that we call appearances, where you can see our appearances on other people's projects. And as of right now, there's 3 videos of Henry on World War II TV. There's one of Jeff on the aforementioned History Behind the Page. And then obviously when she posts the episode I did on her YouTube channel, you can see it there. And that page will continue to grow. One last thing, and then not so World War II, but I want to bring it up just because it falls under the Digital 410 Media, which is the family we do here. I'm a kind of a content creator, not successfully, but I do 3 podcasts. I do have a YouTube channel, TikTok, Facebook. I finally hit that like beloved milestone at every content creator. I currently have a video trending on TikTok with 1.3 million views and climbing. So I finally.
Oh, that's great, man. What's the vid?
I am not one of these people who try to get clout or use poor happenstance by random strangers in public. And that's what this video looks like. But if you watch the secondary video, you can see the history. Here's the history. Interestingly enough, Carrie, before injuring herself, she is starting to make a name for herself in the fishing community amongst the TikTokers, because we go out kayak fishing and we always live stream on TikTok. And she gets more viewers than I do because, well, she's a woman and people like to watch women do cool things like hunting and fishing. And a company reached out to her called Earthy Paws, and they make dog toys and dog treats and stuff. And anyhow,
I think I've heard of them.
They reached out to her and they sent her like our Boston Terrier, like 2 boxes full of just high-end quality dog toys with the thing she was supposed to do a little review video on TikTok. And so she sent it to the Digital 410 P.O. Box, which you guys can find on WTSPWWII-EP122-Saipan under Contact Us. That is our official P.O. Box. And so I had to go to the UPS store where the official Digital 410 P.O. Box was at, and I went inside, got her Earthy Paws. Now, when I got out of my car, nothing was going on, walked across the parking lot, walked inside, opened my P.O. box, grabbed the box, and walked out in a true life 10 seconds. One thing I learned from working radio is people overestimate how long time is. They think 10 seconds is 4 seconds. When I worked in radio, I could literally leave my studio, walk down the hall, use the restroom, wash my hands, come back within 30 real seconds, and that wasn't even rationing. So, because time's actually rather long. So I was literally in the building for 10 seconds. And as I walk out, it's 94 degrees. A UPS man walks up to me and says, "Hey, can you come document this? This guy's pissing me off." Now, as I have said in a follow-up TikTok, I was not carrying a stenographer machine, nor did I have a shirt on that said Notary Public, so I'm not sure what sort of documentation he was expecting from me. But he asked me, and those were his words, to document this. And he pointed over, without a context, his UPS truck and some cars. And so I just assumed that he either hit someone's car or someone hit his truck, he couldn't find them, or something happened, and he needs a way to document it. Maybe his battery's dead on his phone. I've since found out UPS will not allow their drivers to take their phones with them. And so I proceeded just to walk over, and I pulled the phone out of my pocket, but it was still locked because I didn't see what the hell he's talking about. So he documented what? And that's when he said, and I'm going to censor it, he said, "Hey, this effing guy left his dog in the car." I'm like, "What?" Now it's 94 degrees outside, and there's a dog in the driver's seat panting. I was like, "Well, how long has he been in there?" He's like, "At least 20 minutes. I'm like, "Hey, it's hot Florida."
Yeah.
I said,
yeah, that's a big deal, man.
Now, this conversation literally 20 seconds into it, because I mean, how long to just ask me to tell that story? Not even 20 seconds. I said, "Well, is the door unlocked?" He said, "I don't know." So I went to reach for the door, and all of a sudden behind me, I hear, "F you guys, I was only inside for 12 minutes. To which point the UPS driver says, "I've been here for 20 minutes offloading my truck. You were here before I got here, so F you." And then that's when I turned on my phone, and literally the video is like 20 seconds, but it's the UPS driver telling that guy, they're cussing at each other, "F you, F you." And the UPS driver tells him, "F you, you don't deserve that dog, you shit-ass owner." And then there's another 1 or 2 FUs, but this thing has gotten 1.3 million views because people are so thrilled that this UPS driver is telling this guy off for leaving his dog in a hot car in Florida.
What was the... I mean, yeah, that's a big deal, man. So what was the result? What ended up happening?
The guy got in his car, turned it on, and left. The whole interaction was 3.5, probably, I don't know, the whole video in itself is probably 38 seconds long.
Mm-hmm. So you were never really involved in it. You were just shooting.
And so at the end of the video, I said, "Well, in the state of Florida, we could smash out that guy's window legally, and then I put the phone away. But the way you get video views is content where people have something to say about that topic and or create arguments. And so not only do people love the UPS, man, but then you got people, well, why didn't you break out the window? And I've created follow-ups. I had like 200. Was the AC on? To which I posted a video. Well, if the AC was on, don't you think the guy would have came out and said, hey, dipshits, my AC's on. Why don't you go piss off somewhere else? That's what I would say if someone's accusing me.
Yeah.
But no, you can hear him start his car up and he left. I posted that. That happened Monday last week. Actually, the same day Carrie blew out her name. No, Tuesday. Mm-hmm. That happened Tuesday. And it happened on the way home. So that happened at 5 p.m. We do the What's in Your Head podcast at 9:30, much like we do this one. When I checked at 9:30, the thing had 5,000 views. Well, it's not bad. I've had some blow up like that. And so, dude, you guys won't believe what happened. This stupid thing happened. I put this dumb video up, 5,000 views. Show lasts 2 hours. I get off. I check. It has 30,000. The thing got 15,000 views in 2 hours.
Wow.
I was like, whoa. Next morning I wake up, it's at 80,000. By the end of the first full day, I was already at 200,000. And so by today, almost a week later, it's at 1.3. It just hit 1.3 today. And so it's crazy to see. And of course, now other people watching my other videos. So anyhow, little milestone there for the Digital 410 Network. Nothing we created, just... So, I was telling people the two crazy things that happened in my life happened to other people I was just a witness to. Carrie blowing out her leg and this interaction between the UPS guy and that. So you and I were talking about, hey, let's talk about Saipan and maybe what's going on in Guadalcanal in this time in history.
Yeah.
And so I was refreshing my Saipan history, and I was watching some YouTube videos while I was taking a shower. Before taking a shower after I got off the bike. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me, and I think Robert Leckie covered it in his book, but I don't recall any real coverage of it in your father's book. Obviously, this isn't Europe. This isn't, a trip across the channel with the occasional U-boat in the water. Mm-hmm. These guys are in the Pacific. They're traveling all over via boat. Did your father ever get caught up in any sort of pre-invasion naval battle where his ship that he was on was, whether being strafed by planes, getting shelled at by Japanese ships? I mean, was he ever... I'm sure it happened to people, because obviously when you're doing an invasion, there's oftentimes, not always, but depending on the availability of their Air Force, we all know about the kamikaze and all that stuff. But do you ever recall him ever talking about getting stuck in a pre-invasion naval battle?
That's a great question. The short answer is no, but I will say, Don, as you know, I've been combing through his unpublished portions of his manuscript.
Sure.
And there's two things come to my mind on that subject, not naval battles. Okay. But, one of them right after Peleliu when they got on the Sea Runner to go back to Pavuvu in the Russell Islands.
Now, what exactly is a Sea Runner for those?
The Sea Runner was a merchant marine. It was a troop ship. It was not a U.S. naval vessel. That is the ship that when K-35 or when 1st Marine Division came off of. I don't know about the 1st Marines because they came off several weeks before the 5th and 7th Marines did. But when the 5th Marines and 7th Marines came off of Peleliu in October 44, mid-October 44, they boarded the Sea Runner. It then took them back.
Was that like a replacement for the George S. Elliott that sank, that dropped them off to begin with? Well, dropped off the 1st Marine to begin with?
It would have been a lot like that. I mean, I'd have to go look up in my mind, the name Sea Runner is fresh because he said we boarded the Sea Runner to ride back to Pavuvu. And there was an interesting thing. I don't know that I want to really get into that, but I will say this: when he boarded ship, and he rode the troop ship was the it wasn't the General Howes, because that's the one he took from Noumea up to the Russell Islands after advanced infantry training. But let me see, the President Polk, that was the troop ship he boarded in basically right after Christmas 1943 in San Diego to head out to the Russell Islands and get in theater. Well, no, he took the President Polk from San Diego to New Caledonia. Sorry, but the President Polk, that was his first exposure to a troop ship, and so he wrote and this didn't make it into With the Old Breed, but he talked about how they were being told, like severe disciplinary action for anybody throwing so much as a gum wrapper overboard.
Mm-hmm. Cigarette butt.
Because if any lurking submarines saw a pattern of garbage, they would know, man, it's a troop ship.
Yep.
And troop ships, oil tankers, and freighters were soft, slow targets.
Mm-hmm.
Juicy, fat, slow, desirable targets for a submariner, as opposed to a warship, which was a lot faster, more heavily armed, and could defend itself.
Now, I don't want to be a corrective Sally, because I used to say submariner as well, but I have recently
Is it submariner?
I have recently learned from the Fatal Dive, as well as a submariner who called into a podcast. Basically, the only time submariner is used when referring to a watch by Rolex, but it's actually colloquially, if you don't want to piss off our friends in the Navy, they're submariners. A submariner is a watch.
I pride myself in trying to not mispronounce words, so thank you for telling me that.
Yep.
So, if you're a submariner, then it's a big, nice, desirable target, troop ship. But yeah, the other incident, I'd kind of like to hold that back, because that's going to be in my book whenever.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Is like, ooh, is there any stuff from the boot camp and enlistment times that was cut out of the book for
yeah, tons of stuff on that in Pavuvu. That
that's awesome, because I mean, that's the sort of thing that I think the audience, the fans of his work, and because that's one of the things I enjoyed about You'll Be Sorry is the chapter of it was. If it wasn't for Sid Phillips, I would have never known that they were given, all their toiletries, including a bucket, and then they were docked $25, but they only made $21 a month. So you basically, your first check and $4 out of your second one were already property of the United States Marine Corps, because you actually had to pay for your gear that they gave you in boot camp. I never knew that.
Yeah, the bucket issue. I remember my dad telling me about that when I was a kid.
Yeah, the bucket issue. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to let you kind of kick us off, and I'll jump in because I'm always running off the mouth. Let's talk a little bit about Saipan, or maybe where we were in Guadalcanal this time of year.
Well, yeah. So, all right, what is this? June 27th? Yeah, June 27th. So if I just always like to, especially since we're in this, every year for the next few years is going to be the 80th anniversary of something in World War II. So, June, late June of 42. Just to kind of put things, to contextualize things. I mean, what would have been going on? So, the Japanese were probably hard at work trying to get what became Henderson Field. Obviously it wasn't Henderson Field at that point, but they were working away on that, trying to get an aerial presence so they could begin to figure out how to sever the lifelines to Australia. Your buddies, the Coast Watchers, that we talked about and had some great conversations about, I'm sure they were trying to perfect their communications networks all up and down the Solomon Islands.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is they gave each Coast Watcher a radio call sign, much like a radio station, but usually it was a 3-character call sign that was either the initials of their wife, a daughter, a mother, or something along the line. So it was usually their first, middle, and last name initials, and that's how each little group would sign off with their own little radio call sign.
Yeah, that's an interesting little tidbit. But if you think about it, so the Marines landed on Guadalcanal August 7th of 42. So June, the Japanese are hard at work trying to fortify the airfield. They've probably got plenty of air power up in Rabaul at this point, and they're trying to start bringing some of those Japanese naval aircraft down into the Solomons. You've got the other thing going on with them would have been, late June of 42. The combined fleet was probably licking its wounds after still trying to recoup.
Yep.
Now if you jump to late June of 1943, at that point they're licking their wounds after completely being kicked off Guadalcanal. They're starting to move on up into the central and northern Solomons. I don't think Bougainville was quite going to happen yet, but they were looking at New Georgia, Rendova, Munda Point. We, of course, were looking to make forays into that and project our military hegemony into that zone so we could more comfortably start bombing Rabaul. And then if you jump to that would have been June of 43. If you jump to late June of 44, well, then you got, the 27th Army Division and the 4th Marine Division. And which other Marine Division was it that hit Saipan?
Second.
Was it the 2nd Division, 2nd and 4th? Was there a 3rd division? I think.
Well, it was similar to Guadalcanal in the way that as the 5th Marines were attached to the 1st Division. So, hold on, I was looking at this prior to the show. Let me just back up my Google search here. So, United States. So it was made up of. Let's get past the naval forces. So Task Force 56 consisted of the 4th Amphibious Corps, headed up by Holland Mad Smith. And then, so it was the 2nd Marine Division. Attached to the 2nd Marine Division was the 6th Marine Division and the 8th Marine Regiment, as well as the 2nd Marine Regiment and the 10th Marine Regiment for artillery, as well as the 18th Marine Regiment Engineers. So that made up the 2nd Marine Division. So that's who was attached to them.
Yeah, 8th Marines were 2nd Division.
Yeah, and then the 4th Marine Division had the 23rd Marine Regiment, which was on Blue Beach, which I guess I should have said that for the other one. Then Yellow Beach was 25th Marine Regiment. Floating in reserve was the 24th Marine Regiment. And later on, after D-Day, the 14th Marine Regiment came in with artillery, as well as the 20th Marine Regiment for the engineers. And then, as you said, the 27th Infantry Division in the Army had 16,440 officers and enlisted men. And they handed Blue Beaches. And the armor consisted of the 762nd Tank Battalion, as well as the 766th Tank Battalion. And attached to them were the 102nd Engineers and the 502nd Engineers. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
Well, Saipan was such an iconic moment in the Pacific War because Saipan was really the linchpin of the inner defensive ring for Japan.
Not only that, but it was the first true Japanese-owned territory that we had fought on. Prior to that, everything was stuff that Japan took that they did not own prior to all the nonsense. So Saipan was
right, because Guam was a U.S. mandate, so they took Guam, but that had been ours.
Yeah, Guadalcanal clearly, and and as well as this was the first real sign of civilization. I mean, they had towns and cities, if you will, there. I mean, they had developed, buildings. This wasn't just that.
Heavy civilian population.
And the landing was by no means a repeat of Guadalcanal. It wasn't just, hey, well, let's land and walk in. It was, they took a licking. Pre-naval battles prior to the invasion. And they, like I said, I was refreshing, actually watching, the post-war footage, but made of the day. And it's interesting. They would give the casualty numbers, but they would never give death numbers. They would just say, and of course, some of our boys didn't come home. But they were talking about, you were talking about leading into this Midway and how Japan was kind of licking their wounds from Midway and then licking their wounds from getting kicked off Guadalcanal. The pre-naval battle, if you will, as small-ish as it was the first time since Midway we had any real substantial engagement with anything representing the Japanese Air Force.
Well, yeah, and carrier air power, because Mariana's Turkey Shoot came about as a result of the naval battle surrounding, which, June of 44. Absolutely. So that after Midway, then you had Battle of the Eastern Solomons, which was carrier, an iconic American-Japanese carrier battle. That was August of 42. Then October 42's Battle of Santa Cruz. After that, there was no American-Japanese carrier battle until roll the clock ahead to Saipan. Of Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, June of 44.
We sunk like 3 or 4 carriers and then a handful of miscellaneous ships, something along those lines.
Well, I mean, by that time, I'm not sure which was the Taiho one, but that was a new Japanese carrier. Unfortunately, they didn't have a whole lot of qualified aviators at that point to put on it.
And I don't want to belabor this point because we've gone over so many times. But whenever you say something like that, I can't help but point out to how lucky's not the right word, but how beneficial it was to us that the tactics of the Japanese Empire and the insanity of Hitler led to so many dumb ideas and, sadly for them, poor treatment of their troops and misappropriation and misuse of their manpower. Mm-hmm. You know, the amount of pilots they lost due to the early on kamikaze stuff and things like that. And now they're stuck with, rushing to find replacements. And that was a good thing. Obviously, it sucked to have the kamikazes, but the fact that they're blowing through pilots at a much faster rate than if they would have just simply waited for us to shoot them down, that's kind of beneficial to us, just like with the bonsai charges. Yes, it sucked for the guys on the front line, but when we're talking a numbers game and it's who has the most troops over a long period of time, when they're just wiping out so many young men by doing stupid strategic stuff, it benefited us greatly.
I just realized when you bring up the bonsai charges, so Saipan, another iconic thing about Saipan, not only, losing that was a breach in the inner defensive ring for Japan, but that presaged a complete shift in their tactics because you look at what 1st Marine Division was going to face, and while Saipan was going on, they were training up in the Russell Islands, my father among them on Pavuvu. Well, then, here in September, they're going to go to Peleliu. Well, on Saipan, you began to see this. It wasn't practiced to the finely honed degree that it was later, but that was where they began to use the defense in depth strategy.
Yeah, because they started to realize, we're losing guys and this ain't working.
Make them pay for every yard.
What was the original? Stop them at the water's edge was the original thing. It was, okay, we're going to do bonsai charge. Everybody's job is to take out 10 Marines for your one life. And they were hoping the math game would work out, and it didn't.
Right. And so there actually was a bonsai charge on Saipan, but not as many as they had hoped.
Yeah, nothing like what we saw at Luna Point or AK Alligator Creek, that the piles among, the substantial amount of resources and life on their side. If they wouldn't have lost so many men in that engagement, just imagine how much longer Guadalcanal would have taken to capture.
Oh, certainly. But the tragic thing, you've already brought it up, Don, was you began to see heavy civilian involvement at Saipan, Garapan Point, when they had families hurling themselves off.
And that had
the cliffs.
It's one thing to be a hardened young 19, 20-year-old Army and Marine personnel who was trained to dispatch the enemy. But when you're seeing, basically the code of war going back the longest time, unless you're a complete sociopath and a monster, is leave the women and children alone. And so when you're seeing these, this may be a little harsh, but I'm going to say it, when you're seeing these fanatically brainwashed Saipan citizens who were told and indoctrinated that the United States Marines and Army were full of rapists and cannibals, and that if they come and capture your city, they're going to rape your women and eat your children. And you're a 19-year-old American from Nebraska. This is your first deployment. You've been there through these battles, and now you're seeing women throwing their babies over cliffs and then jump. I couldn't even imagine just trying to even get that sentence out. That had to be just so. I don't even know how you would go on after seeing that.
Well, I think, for young Marines and soldiers, who that was their first encounter with the Japanese. To see that they were coaxing these civilians, and of course that just roll ahead to Okinawa in 45 was practiced to an even greater degree.
Because once again, you can justify killing Japanese because it's kill or be killed. They're coming to kill you, but you think you're liberating these people, and all of a sudden you see them walking over a cliff, and there they go. Like, what the hell? That just goes you the tactics that the Empire did, whether it was with their own soldiers or the people they ruled over with, don't know the phrase, whether you want to say, brainwashing or, indoctrination or what have you. That's just, that just adds to the horror that these guys had to face on top of the stuff that they're already experiencing. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. And and then when the Japanese did lose at Saipan, I mean, that really, from stuff I've read, I'm sure you've read too, from that point forward, well, it was one of their war ministers, I'm not sure which, I don't think it was Tojo who actually said this, but they had done the math. They knew that if they lost Saipan, B-29s could fly from Saipan directly to the Japanese home islands.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that was coming, and one of their officials said, "Hell is upon us," and it really, I think they had hoodwinked a lot of their own citizens up to that point. We know that they exaggerated victory claims, and aggrandized a lot of things that should not have been. But really, after Saipan, that gave the lie to everything. After they lost Saipan, there was everybody knew, which, I mean, I don't think too many people on the home islands, with the rationing and the things they had endured, the shortages of material and resources, they saw these things coming. But after they lost Saipan, there was no more pulling the wool over anybody's eyes.
And I think Saipan, as well as, I think they saw this as well in Okinawa. I believe it was brought up in both Helmet for My Pillow and With the Old Breed, where the Japanese got so desperate that they would just go to their hospitals, and anybody who could even remotely shuffle, they'd give them a pitchfork or a stick or anything and just send them down the hill.
Yeah.
Anybody who can just, if you could maintain your balance and even do a slow shuffle, you're going in. And that just goes to show the lack of compassion, but two, just the overall desperation of their tactics and their mind state.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I remember he said it in many interviews. He told me, I mean, my father told me that we were told, preparing for the invasion, after Okinawa, when they thought they were going to have to invade Kyushu, they were told, you better get used to killing women and children.
Yeah.
So,
not to jump too quick, but me, I like to, when I hear somebody say something that triggers a thought, I like to hit it while we got to pause.
It's called riffing, man.
Your dad brought it up in his book. They didn't bring it up in the miniseries, so if people haven't read the book, how much of a kick in the nuts and demoralization was it when they finally captured Okinawa, that they were essentially said, okay, turn around, walk the other direction, and start picking up all the battle trash?
Oh,
that
was.
You want to talk about make work? And what was it? Anything over 30 cal you had to pick up, and then they had to bury all the Japanese dead.
Was it over 30 or over 50 cal?
Maybe over 50. 30 is a little bit small, but yeah, the 30-06 and the pistol cartridges, don't worry about, but all the tubes that clover leaves came in, anything over 50 cal, trash, uniforms, dead bodies, just basically, here's a sack with a stick with a nail on it, get to work. It's community service time. That
was, so let's see, June of 45, not sure the exact date. But and some great stuff in the original manuscript, that some great tidbits that didn't get published. But when they got down near, I think Kanishi Ridge, was like K-35 barely got into the fight on Kanishi Ridge by the time. And by then, the 8th Marines, the 2nd Marine Division, had been brought in. And the 8th Marines were a very good outfit and had a great reputation for us from Tarawa. So, the 5th Marines were really happy to see the 8th Marines show up. But, Kanishi Ridge was kind of like the last taste of combat for my dad. And there were other units. I think the 7th Marines had a little bit more involvement on Kanishi than the 5th. But yeah, I mean, when they finally realized that the Japanese had been ground down to a nub, there was nothing left, and essentially the battle for Okinawa was over, there was an enormous sense of relief. And then what you're talking about, okay, everything over 50, pick it up, stack it, bury enemy dead. They were infuriated.
Well, I understand, make work. I understand maybe let's clean the environment up, but have the guys who just got off the transport who are, still full of, who haven't, don't make the guys who had to suffer through it and watch their friends die to create the mess have to clean that up. Let the guys fresh off the ships who came from overseas, who are nice
exactly.
and full of piss and vinegar and looking for something to do, not the guys who are dying of dysentery and, dealing with the wounds that they got, both mentally and physically. Just because you didn't get shot doesn't mean you don't have blisters the size of Texas on your feet, and don't mean you're not half malnourished and dehydrated and, got post-traumatic stress disorder and any little sound and just, all that. It's just the idea that, okay, guys, here you go. Here's a sack. Start picking, stacking, and shoveling.
It wasn't very often that I mean, really, I don't think there were too many times growing up I heard my father say anything negative about the Marine Corps, but man, that they were all infuriated at that.
Yeah. Did he say?
And there was, I think, I can't remember if it's in the unpublished writing that I've been through or in the book, but I will toss this out. He and a couple of guys, Snafu might have been one of them, like they were taking 10, they take a little break and they go over to this nice, like they had, this was, probably a couple of weeks after the shooting and everything. And they find a nice little meadow with trees and everything. And there's no dead bodies. Mm-hmm. It's actually really nice. And they go sit down and break open some K rations. And then somebody comes over, an NCO, yeah, y'all need to get out of here. This is for officers only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
that was in his book.
Oh, it is in the book. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
He's basically, they found like a little patch of just the one little area where the grass hadn't been burnt away, blown away. It's just a place that they could sit down in some softness and sit in the shade, get out of the sun. And they were basically rousted out of there because some lieutenants and, higher brass want to come. So even that, they finally found a little bit of peace. Nope. That's too good for you guys. Go sit in the mud.
Oh yeah.
Yep. That was definitely in the book, but no, see, and I think that's the kind of stuff that, as we said earlier, people be interested when your project comes to fruition. But Saipan, by no means. I mean, we hear about the mud and New Britain and and Okinawa and the heat and Peleliu. Saipan geographically was a huge pain in the ass too, because it was all limestone and coral rock faces that Japanese are held up in, and gotta go.
Well,
go ahead.
Here's another thing about Saipan. So, Saipan, of course, was, and I'm kind of giving a little teaser for the article that's about to go to press in World War II magazine. That I wrote that article about Marine and Army cooperation, inter-service rivalry, and then inter-service cooperation. And, Saipan, of course, was the famous Smith versus Smith, Holland Smith, Marine Corps commander, overall commander, and then General Ralph Smith, who was 27th Army Division commander. And, the Smith controversy, because Hal and Mad didn't think General Ralph Smith was moving fast enough. They were headed toward a particular point. Don't remember which one it was. 4th Marine Division was on one side. Another Marine Division was on the other. 27th Army Division was in the middle. And the two Marine divisions pushed ahead, and the Army Division lagged behind. And so, of course,
I think
Hal and Mad.
Wasn't it like the Marines almost had unintentionally, just the way the geography played out and the way the planning played out, the Marines kind of, I don't want to say had easy going, but they're kind of atop the ridgeline, where when the Army was starting going through the middle, they were kind of down in the valley.
Correct.
And so they were getting plinked from the top, and so they had a lot tougher sledding to go, because everybody knows in combat, though, he who has the high ground holds the advantage. Well, when you're not only in a high ground, but you're almost in a borderline box canyon. Granted, they had a way out behind them, but you're basically walking into a valley and trying to work your way up, and you have to go through the rigors of flamethrowers and tanks and dynamite. You can only move so fast.
Yeah, and of course, and then, Hal and Mad Smith was not, and he was prejudiced against the Army. Everybody knew that. But he was certainly not going to tactfully express his frustration, and he basically ordered Ralph Smith, 27th Division commander, off the island. And wouldn't even let him say goodbye to his subordinates and the guys he'd worked with for a long time. So, and that obviously generated a lot of ill will and unhappiness between between the soldiers and the Marines. But when push came to shove, they got the job done. But that was certainly an iconic moment of the Saipan battle.
Yeah, it was tough sledding, and the problem with Saipan too is it had two airfields. You had one in the south and one in the north, and so you can capture the first airfield, but if the Navy, the Marines who are launching off the Navy ships or the Navy pilots, they aren't keeping the Japanese at bay. The air cover plays a huge advantage on infantry warfare, at least back in World War II. And from what I understand, and I think you pointed out, the biggest difference between Marine Corps pilots versus pilots from the other branches, the Marine Corps pilots were essentially trained to, not only were they trained to cover the infantry, but they actually trained along with the infantry, so they understood infantry tactics, and so they understood what was required of them when they were coming to provide air support. They knew how the guys were going to move. They knew where to put those bombs, and the Marine Corps air support was used really as a overwatch, opposed to different things. And so that's the Marines heavily relied on their air cover. But when you're landing on an island that has two Air Force bases, luckily at that point the Japanese Air Force was running, on fumes then too. Could you imagine trying to invade that island if they had a fully staffed Air Force at both runways? That naval battle would have been even worse.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as the kamikazes got to be a bigger and bigger threat, I mean, then you had more and more Marines on aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
Because so much of their war had been land-based. But as the kamikaze threat, which the kamikazes changed the face of so many things, because that I think that had a lot to do with getting the Marines on active aircraft carriers rather than just being transited from one place to another on aircraft carriers, actually having them fly active missions on and off aircraft carriers. But it also probably, of course, I guess by that late in the war, you'd already seen U.S. Navy air groups had begun to move away from the, like early in the war, Coral Sea, Midway, you had a certain number of fighter bomber, or you had a certain number of fighters, certain number, which would have been F4Fs at that point, certain number of SBD Dauntless dive bombers, and a certain number of torpedo bombers. And as the war went on, the air group, the composition of the air groups is changing. You started to have fewer of the dive bombers and torpedo bombers and more of the fighters. Again, because of the kamikaze threat, they needed more fighters.
No, I don't want to put you on the spot because I don't know the answer, which is why I'm asking it. And,
I may not either. But
we all have our own strong points, and one thing we don't cover too much on here because none of us really study all that much is the Navy. But we know of, you got the famous Cactus Air Force, and then we know all about the different famous air crews over Europe. But you and Jeff are more into the aviation side. Is there a particular Navy air crew that kind of got famous for any sort of missions or runs that would kind of be a household name for those who are in the know?
Well, the one that comes to my mind would be VF3, Fighting 3, VF3, Navy Fighter Squadron 3, because that's the squadron that produced Butch O'Hare.
Okay.
Butch O'Hare shot down, I think it was, early in 42, like might have been February of 42. He shot down 5 G4M Betty bombers. And then obviously O'Hare Airport's named after Butch O'Hare, but I think VF3 was also home to Jimmy Thatch, who developed the Thatch Weave.
Okay.
Which do you understand what I'm talking about when I say that?
Yeah, like thatch roofs?
No, the Thatch Weave, Jimmy Thatch.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, the aeronautical
maneuver. The F4Fs
I'm like
covering each other's, weaving back and forth. And instead of turning with a zero to take it head, to try to turn with a zero, and an F4F, there's no way you can do that. So they learned stay, diagonally off each other's tails. When a zero would try to turn toward them, one of them would turn into it, and they could cover each other's tails. And I think O'Hare and was either, yeah, I think O'Hare and Thatch went up and worked those tactics out themselves and discovered pretty quickly that it was damned effective.
Now, I know for those of you like, Don, how dumb are you? Why would you say Thatcher's? I watch a ton of Naked and Afraid. Matter of fact, we've been watching like marathons, especially since Carrie's laid up that in the show alone. So when we're not fishing or working on, I'm watching a lot of shows about people trying to survive in the woods. And so when you said the thatch weave, I'm like, you're trying to tell me that the thatch weave roof system wasn't invented by like some like people living in the Amazon like thousands of years ago? So that's where my mind was at. So forgive me for getting stuck up on that. I watch a whole lot of survival shows.
But hey, that makes me want to say this real quick.
Sure.
So come October, when we will be talking about the anniversary of the Battle of Santa Cruz Islands, which I mentioned earlier, which was the last American versus Japanese carrier action until later on in 1944, part of the Saipan operation. I have a friend that I work with whose uncle was in, I think it was VF-72 or VF-71. He was an F-4F pilot, and he was shot down during the Battle of Santa Cruz Islands. And my buddy, John Franklin is his name, he has shown me a box full of his uncle's photographs and various things that he owned. And in it is a letter from his air group commander, from a squadron commander who knew him quite well and wrote to his dad describing in detail what happened. And when it comes on to October, I'd like to read that letter on our show. Please. And have John on too.
So I wanted to bring this up because we do this from time to time. It's kind of fun. I was thinking, I YouTubed the Battle of Saipan, and I watched the probably 1945 footage or whatever that they compiled with the war footage and all that. And I got to thinking, when was the last time Hollywood or the movie industry per se put out a movie specifically about Saipan? And can you think of any off the top of your head?
Yeah, Saipan.
Now, Wind Talkers doesn't count because they cover Saipan, but it wasn't specifically about Saipan.
Wait, Windbreakers?
Yeah, Windbreakers. That's one of them. But no, apparently, and I haven't seen this movie, in 2011, Oba, The Last Samurai came out.
Okay.
Never seen it, never heard of it. I'm looking at some screenshots on Rotten Tomatoes. Movie information. After World War II ends with his imperial surrender, a Japanese captain decides to lead his unit into one last battle on Saipan. So apparently this is at the war's end, and he said, hell with it, we're going to rock and roll. Genre drama. Okay, so this is actually a Japanese film. Well, actually it says original language is Japanese. They do have some American actors playing the Marines here. Sadly, you want to guess what Oba, The Last Samurai, what kind of ratings we have on Rotten Tomatoes in 2011?
36%.
Not that bad. No, this is 2011 before we went completely anti-patriotic in this country. So 53% is the audience score. No reviews from major movie reviewers. So it actually has 0 as far as top critics, but 53% with the people. Now, interestingly enough, prior to Oba, looks like Hell to Eternity is probably the biggest. They show Windbreakers on here, but then they have the Battle for Saipan. But yeah, it looks like Hell to Eternity is probably. Let me see when Hell to Eternity. Let me put that in the old Rotten Tomatoes. Hell to Eternity. Okay, maybe not. Hell to Eternity. 1960 was Hell to Eternity.
Okay.
Let's see what it got on the old Rotten Tomatoes. It looks like, it's one of those films that pulled a lot of, they shot in black and white so they could use real war footage. Doesn't even come up on Rotten Tomatoes, so no reviews there. Let's see who's in this bad boy. Stars Jeffrey Hunter, David Janison, and Vic Damone. So
David Jansen. Yeah, I remember him.
David Jansen. But yeah, let's see. When his adopted Japanese American family is sent to the Manizanzar after Pearl Harbor, a young Chicago enlists in the Marines to become the hero of the Battle of Saipan. Manzanar. His family is sent to Manzanar. I don't even know. I don't know if that's an internment camp or what. I don't know. Well, let's Google that. Let's see what the heck that's making reference to, since we're just shooting from the hip here. National Historic. Okay, so Manzanar. Once again, Manzan. So Manzanar, Nar, is a site of one of 10 American concentration camps where more than 100 internment camps, as we like to call them, but modern day we change terminologies. Site of American concentration camps where more than 120,000 Japanese Americans were incarcerated during World War II from March 1942 to November 1945. This particular place is located in the state of California, and it is a historical park now. Yep. So apparently in Hell to Eternity, one of the main actors is a Japanese American whose family was sent to an internment camp, so he enlisted in the Marines. And that was out in 1960. But other than that, there was really no, pictures specifically in modern day designed to tell the story of the Battle of Saipan.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something hopefully somebody will do in the future.
Well, it was such an iconic battle for the reasons we've already talked about. I mean, because really that was the beginning of, and the topography afforded those opportunities for, defense in depth, although really Petaluma was where it got enacted en masse and honed to a very fine degree. Of course, Colonel Nakagawa was a tactical genius on that plane, but
yeah, I gotcha. What you reading? You reading anything new?
Yeah, well, still I am. I'll tell you exactly. Still in Conquering Tide, Ian Toll's second volume, and I am page 282.
I haven't made any progress in my book just because dealing with Carrie and all the things going on in the house. I haven't had any leisure time to sit down and to dig into that. But we do want to thank each and every one of you for continuing to listen to the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. If you listen to the podcast for any amount of time, you know that we used to broadcast live from the At Computer Studio, but it's no longer At Computer Studio because, well, they're no longer around. There's a lot of small businesses thanks to the pandemic. So if you have a company, and maybe you're a company that provides services nationwide, because obviously it's a worldwide podcast, but even if you're not, you just want to support the show, you want to maybe sponsor the podcast studio and have it named after your company, or if you're interested in maybe buying some advertising for super cheap rates, send us an email at mailcall@WTSPWWII-EP122-Saipan.com. Just put subject line advertising, and we will hook you up with some very, very, very affordable advertising. We're not looking to get rich. We're just trying to cover our nut over here with all the overhead, because podcasting does have overhead involved in it. And if you aren't a business owner but you want to help us, you can head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. Click on the Patreon link, which I've been working on the website. But yeah, click on the Patreon link, like and sign up. We have 3 plans, but the $1 a month is more than what we need. So if you want to sign up for the $1 a month plan, great. If you want to sign up for the $3 a month plan, fantastic. And if you want to sign up for the $7 a month plan, we love you so much. We'll send you a free t-shirt. And as we were saying at the beginning of the podcast, one of the perks of the sign up for Patreon is you get access to the OG5 podcast, which is basically a podcast from the guys here at the network. No real format. We just talk about whatever. And Henry and I just recorded one prior to this show. It's a short little one. It wasn't scheduled. It wasn't intended. We were just having fun before the show, talking music.
Talking about Irish punk.
Talking about Irish punk and kids who listen to hip-hop music through bullhorns in their cars, thus cutting out the bass, which is confusing to me. But that's signs that I'm getting old, I reckon. which I'm getting older in 2 days, but we won't go down there. But thank you guys so much. We don't have the out music because, well, computer problems. So anyhow, thank you guys so much. I believe Jeff will be back. No. Oh, we need to decide this right now. Do we want to take next week off for 4th of July? Yes, we do. So
probably be
there will be no show. I will put up a best of a redeployment episode. Now, Monday is the 4th. I will try to get one put up prior, but if it's a day late, don't get mad at me because I like to, celebrate holidays too. So I will find time to put up a redeployment episode. But thank you guys so much for your continued support, and please head over to youtube.com. You can also find a link on What's the Scuttlebutt or dhi410.com. Please like, subscribe, watch some of our videos. We're looking down the barrel of meeting the requirements from YouTube for monetization. I think basically we need like 45 more hours, but there's like 600 videos on my channel, and so there's plenty of content. So if you want to go watch, heck, all you gotta do is go watch a handful of What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. These bad boys are almost 2 hours a piece. So if you want to get support the show, you can do it that way too. Everything helps. And get yourself a cool t-shirt like I have on now. But that's enough of the shameless plugs. Thank you so much. Jeff, I think, will be back on the next episode with more tales from the road. And then following that up, when we get closer to the anniversary, I think we're doing it closer in the month because of the holidays. But we will have the aforementioned Sarah, the history chick, at the History Chick 1941, host of History Behind the Page. As we found out when she's on, her little interest, the one we all have it. For Jeff, it's Air Corps. For me, it's M1 helmets and canteens. And for Henry, it's Air Corps as well. But everybody has that one little topic that just strikes her fancy. And for Sarah, it is the USS Indianapolis. And so she is going to come on. And basically, we're going to hand the show over to her. We're going to pull her string and let her run off at the mouth like I tend to do. And then we'll jump in occasionally with some follow-up questions to keep her going. But I think we're going to have a pretty interesting deep dive into all things USS Indianapolis, which I'm looking forward to because, as we said earlier, we really don't cover enough Navy stuff on here because, well, there's a lot of information and we can't know it all. And so if you have information that we don't know and you maybe think you can come on the show and help, kill some time, provide some content, and you want to possibly come on the show as a guest, we're more than happy. Email us info@d-410.com, or more importantly, mail, call it WTSPWWII-EP122-Saipan. Henry, you got anything coming down the pike you want to get out there?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, my article goes to press here in just a few days for World War II. That'll be in the autumn issue of World War II magazine. And right now, that's the only thing I want to mention.
If at all possible, I don't even know if they would have such a thing, but maybe reach out to them right around the time of the releasing and say, hey, is there a link on your site where people can look to see where maybe they can find it in their area? What the coverage distribution or something, or
that's a good idea.
Or we can put the link up to their website. But I'm sure if they're printing magazines, they'd like to move it, or maybe you can order it directly off their website. So maybe we can get the link to their website where people can order a copy. That
would be cool, and because hey man, in my author bio, got my picture, my little bio paragraph, like every person who has an article in there is part on the author bio page. One of the things I put for me is co-host of What's a Scuttlebutt podcast.
So what we're all going to buy a copy, and then we're going to inundate poor Henry's mailman, and we're going to mail him our copies and demand that he use a silver Sharpie to autograph our copies of his magazine, his article. Nothing. I'm serious. We're gonna blow up your mailbox and get that bad boy signed. But yeah, we'll do that on behalf of myself and Jeff, who is always here in spirit. We will talk to you all next week. This is when usually the theme song goes, and my daughter says, we're very inquisitive, as if she's disgusted. This has been I can't say it. This has been a Digital 410. This has been a Digital 410 production. Yeah, it's that bad. Anyhow, thanks, guys.
Laughing.
Yeah, we'll talk to you all next week, and I got to hit this button on the stream, which for some reason looks like it's frozen up, but whatever. If you're watching, no, I don't know why I'm saying it. It's weird. I'm looking at OBS and it's showing our logo, but I'm watching the phone and we're live. But anyhow, we will talk to you all next week. Boop, 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 boop.